Surfing is usually figured out as a fun sport, almost a hobby and not really a sport. I mean, nowadays it's in the Olympics, so it's different. But when it comes to big wave surfing, it's not really fun. After, after spending like
Yeah,
almost 15 years shooting big wave surfing, you film way more dramas than success.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
To be honest, for one world record, you're gonna shoot so many wipeouts, so many jet ski being flipped, body getting destroyed, people being close to bankruptcy because they invested their whole life into their career. And
Portugal.
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 Our vegetables are like rock stars.
Literally, Portugal is a small Disneyland for grown-ups.
You know, I think that Portugal is like my geographic soulmate.
It's hard to explain what it is because it's a feeling.
And when I went there, I absolutely fell in love with Portugal.
I wanted to feel the crunchiness.
Portugal, the Simple Life Podcast.
Portugal, the Simple Life Podcast.
And we're here on his podcast, Portugal Simple Life.
Portugal, the Simple Life Podcast, your insider's perspective into Portugal. And our latest episode starts right now. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, the Simple Life. And I'm really delighted to be joined here by Vincent Kardasik. Did I say it correctly? Bonjour, bon dia.
bon dia, Dylan.
How are you, Vincent?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. We missed each other by a week. You were here in Portugal. Now you're sitting in France?
Yeah, I'm in France this week.
Okay, very nice. Vincent, why don't you start off telling us a bit about you?
I'm 45 years old. I'm originally from France, but I live
1980.
Yeah, 1980 exactly.
Me too.
Yeah, great. So I'm originally from France, but I live where the work is. So I spend quite a lot of time in Portugal for some various projects. I've been involved a lot into the surf industry because I'm a surfer myself. But when it comes to work, I'm a producer slash director slash cinematographer. So I tend to say filmmaker because it gets like everything together and it's easier. And that's pretty much it.
Very nice. What was your first contact with Portugal? How did that all begin for you? Was it because of work or before?
That was, I would say, 2002. I was following a bunch of surfers for a project. So that was work related. And I went to Algarve for the first time. And at the end of the shooting, I had the offer to visit Ericeira, which I heard a lot about. I was already in touch with a few Ericeira locals, Jose Gregorio and Tiago Pires. And I was really curious to visit that place. And I spent only like 3 days over there at that time, but I literally fell in love with the whole area and the vibe. Algarve was beautiful, but when I arrived in Ericeira, it was a love at first sight.
Yeah, that sort of western coastline from Lisbon up, it's completely different to the Algarve. There's a different. It's a bit wilder. It's amazing.
Yeah, but that's what I love about Portugal. You know, if you drive from north to south, you have like so many different backgrounds, so many different areas. So it's almost having the feeling, you know, in 300 or 400 kilometers, you're not changing countries, you know, because the people are still the same. But yeah, all the landscape are different, and there's a lot of variety, you know, from the snowy mountain to the rocky coastline to the beach break or those beautiful cities such as Lisbon or Porto. Yeah, it's a really complete background and a lot of different landscape in not that big of a country.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so that was your first kind of experience. You've obviously been back and forth a lot now and experienced a lot of the country. I mean, how would you describe your relationship with the country? How has that changed between the first impressions and the first moments to what you've experienced Portugal today?
So I came back a lot to Portugal, mostly for work, and I shot a lot of surfing around there when um, when surfing started to really kick in Europe. I would say sometime around 2005, 2007.
Yeah.
Um, at that time, Thiago PLS just qualified for the World Surf Tour, and I had a contract with Quicksilver, so which became at some point in 2010 his main sponsor. So I ended up like coming back more regularly starting 2010 and spending more time with him. Thanks to him, I also visited Madeira for the first time, and we went back there like a few times. And then Nazaré rocks up on the forecast, you know. I mean, it was already forecasted.
Thanks, Mr. McNamara. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Magna. I actually went to Nazaré for the first time in 2006 with Thiago and Jose Gregorio, and and I had a crazy experience over there. It was like super scary. I had no idea what I was doing in the water with them.
You were surfing?
Nah, I was on a jet ski trying to film from a jet ski.
Okay.
And I had some experience at that time, but like I wasn't Nazaré ready at all. I would have never imagined more than like 10 years later, I would be living in Nazaré for 5 years pretty much.
Amazing. I mean, take us back to that experience being on the jet ski. Did you think that those could be surfed? Did you think that that would happen?
Wow. So to be honest, that was the beginning of tow-in surfing in Europe. You know, when you tow in, basically you're assisted by a jet ski. So you're at the rope.
Because tow-in surfing initially was not a thing. It was kind of frowned upon, right? It was something that you didn't do.
It was developed mostly by Laird Hamilton and all the PI crew in Maui, but that was not common in Europe. And then at some point, a few Brazilian surfers, including Ramon Laureano, starting towing in because they had experience, they learned from the Hawaiian, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the European surfer like got together with so Jose, Thiago, some French guy who spent years and years in Hawaii. I mean, if not decades, Michel Laronde and Vincent Lartisien. So basically, I would say 2005, 2006 was definitely the moment towing kicked in Europe, and we were traveling all over the coastline, Spain, France, of course, Portugal. And at some point, Jose Gregorio told us there's some giant wave in Nazaré because he's from Fine Ice originally. His family still live in Fine Ice, so he used to those waves. And we had a couple jet ski, like really basic and not powerful jet ski at all. So he told us we should give it a go, and we did. I remember my assignment or my mission, if I may say, was to capture those waves, but also to help them when it comes to rescue and safety if there was an issue. And after the first wave, I told them, "There's no way I'm going to drive to the inside. This place is like way too dangerous compared to all the spots I used to be in France or in Spain. Yeah, it seemed like total madness, to be honest. To be totally transparent with you, I think when we came back to the harbor, I told them, okay, my first and last time ever, I will never ever come back. And it was winter time, so everything was closed in town. There was no way to find food. The vibe at the harbor was like way different than what it is nowadays. You know,
Yeah.
people were looking at us with our French plate and the jet skis, kind of wondering what we were doing here. Yeah, it was a totally different vibe, but a good learning experience.
Okay, so you got out the water. You said, "I'm never going back in there," and now you've been back in there a lot.
Yeah, I probably said something like that, you know, first and last time ever. I was picturing myself way more comfortable being in Ericeira or around Cascais or area like this. I was like, wow, this place is like way too rough for me, you know, I got humbled.
Yeah. I arrived in 2009 to Portugal. So that was I've been living here since 2009, and Nazaré back then like, I mean, as you know, I'm in real estate, so when I've started speaking to people about Nazaré, people internationally about Nazaré, like nobody knew about this place, and the Portuguese, of course, knew. Like everybody knew Nazaré, it's that old fishing village, and it's got the history and the culture, but nobody knew about Nazaré. And I've also seen it change in terms of more people knowing about it and getting a bit more life and having that history and that culture and that authenticity, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, what do you enjoy about living in Nazaré?
A lot of different things. Well, when it comes to work, the first thing would be being able to stay in Europe. So when I started shooting surfing, obviously I made my break into the film and production industry through surfing.
Yeah.
That wasn't my plan at all, but I ended up following my friends who were like the best surfer at that time. And long story short, that's how I got like my first proper gig, professional gig when it comes to documentary or feature film or even commercial, etc., etc. But if you wanted to do a break in surfing, early 2000, you had to travel to Hawaii and you had to spend quite some time in Hawaii because that was the place to be. Hawaii was, and it's still the mecca of surfing.
Yeah.
But like all the magazines were there, all the big production were there, and um, it's great to be in Hawaii, being under the palm trees and the sunshine, but it's super expensive. Working in the United States when you don't have a visa, it's quite complicated.
Yeah.
Back in the days, that was a transition from euro to dollar, so we were not like that comfortable in terms of money and exchange rate. And at some point, when Nazaré turned into what it is now, well, basically in Nazaré, every day is a production day. That wasn't worth traveling to Hawaii anymore. If you wanted to get some content, to get in touch with the best surfer in the world, to be seen or recognized by some big production company, you could easily spend a few months in Nazaré, make a show reel or create a portfolio, and that was it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to work, that was the first thing. It's not like that it was easier, but it was way more comfortable.
Yeah.
Then when it comes to lifestyle, the way Nazaré is built or the way Nazaré has been developed, you almost always have an eye on the ocean, which is something I love. Pretty much everywhere you go, you can have a look at the wave, you can have a look at the ocean. So you're really close to the ocean and nature. I ended up, the second trip I made there was 2009, I think. So this time I stayed like a couple of days over there, and I literally met some really nice people and really interesting people. All local people, but all with different backstories and different background. I was pretty impressed by already that melting pot of culture and origin. A lot of people were English speaking or French speaking. Most of them had traveled through work or studies. So I connected with a lot of friends, and I enjoy food a lot, like a lot. It really, if you want to make me happy, like give me some good food, and then the rest will come. So of course, like wherever you go in Portugal, you find some good food. So that was a beautiful combo,
Yeah.
like ocean view, great people, great food, and the weather, which is like probably a bit easier, at a winter time than what we have in France. Also,
Sure.
it's always a bit warmer. So yeah, that's literally what got me about Portugal and especially Nazaré.
Yeah. Yeah, food, we could talk for hours about the food there. I mean, there are so many little restaurants and Tascas, and you can have the best seafood sitting on plastic chairs and tables, and it's amazing. If my wife is big on seafood, not so much me. I'm more of a meat eater, but if I say to her, "Come, let's go have some seafood or fish," it's Nazaré. That's always the first choice.
And the good thing about Nazaré is if you want to get the traditional Portuguese food, you will easily find it wherever you go in town. And if at some point you want to be like a little bit more funky and enjoy some mixity, like food more influenced by Brazil and Latin America, for example. You can go to Esmeralda. Lot of like small joint open and mixing more modern food with still the traditional Portuguese or Brazilian touch. I'm thinking about that place I like a lot for brunch or lunch, which is called Oka, and with a wonderful chef named Caroline. It's more like it could look like a street food place, but like all the meals are so elaborated. There's ton of place. There's the Taberna d'Adelia, which is great. There's Celeste. I mean, usually at the beginning of each week, I'm planning my work schedule, what I have to do, and I'm also noting, okay, this place is open that day, so I'm gonna go eat there. There's that great Italian restaurant named Bonta,
Bonta is
which
great. Yeah.
so you know Bonta, so
Yeah, I
you know
know
like
Bonta.
you know the lasagna with pesto de pistachio, and
Yeah.
so
I mean, I think in terms of the restaurants, it's super interesting because you've got the old stalwart restaurants, the ones that have always been there. So, Tascas de Delia and Maria do Mar and, Esmeralda. And then you've got these places that have popped up in the last years like Bonta, Pangeia, little places. There's a Mexican place that we went to not long ago that's just up one of those side streets, which was amazing. A couple of good Indian restaurants as well. So yeah, the food has become a lot more diverse than just the traditional Tascas as well, which is great. I love Sitiado up in Situ, that small little spot. I mean, we love that place as well. There's so many options. It's amazing.
this one is great. There's also like a wonderful sushi place in Alcobaça, which is like only 10 minutes driving from
Okay.
Nazaré.
Yeah,
And
Alcabasa.
it's literally in such a small area. You have like so much diversity when it comes to food. As I was telling you, so I was planning my work schedule, and then I was planning my food schedule every week. And every time I have to travel to Portugal, I'm just looking, oh, this place is going to be open. Okay, so on Tuesday I'm going to eat here. On Wednesday I'm going to eat here, and that's my full Portuguese experience.
That's very Portuguese to plan your days around food. That's what we do here.
I guess that's why I adapt easily.
But Vincent, it's interesting because a lot of the guys, and you'll know this more than me, a lot of the guys end up coming to Nazaré because of the waves, and they end up staying longer because of the place. There's something quite special about this. You mentioned the people, of course, the weather, the food, of course, as well. But there's something quite special about this place that keeps people here.
Yeah, there's a special energy. At some point, it works in Nazaré, but I think it's the same like everywhere in Portugal.
Yeah.
You have to adapt to the rhythm of the area you are. You can try force whatever it is, work, an appointment. It's not going to work. You really have to adapt and to understand the dynamic of most of the towns and village in Portugal. But as soon as you understand that, the best life ever.
Yeah.
You have access to pretty much everything. You have an international airport, an hour and 15-minute driving from Nazaré, 30 minutes from Ericeira. You have access to all the technology. I remember having access to the fiber to the fiber to internet like way before we had it in the southwest of France where I live.
Yeah.
When it comes to TV program or movie theater program, you also can watch all the new outcome. The original Portuguese culture is also great. I ended up being a huge fan of Fado. And I didn't do enough Fado night, but every time I had the opportunity, I was just rushing to make it happen.
Yeah. Have you done Carnival?
Of course, I've done Carnival. I've done Carnival, but I
cannot do
talk.
It like that anyway. Nazaré does it differently than anywhere else. It's insane.
Yeah, I can't talk about Carnival for multiple reasons. Most of it is like I probably don't remember everything which happened during my Carnival night.
Exactly. I talk about Carnival as something I survived a few times, So when I lived in Nazaré, I'm like, I've survived 5 carnivals and now I'm retired, because I don't think I can do another one.
Oh yeah, the first one was intense. I was not ready for it. It's so long. It starts early in January, and it runs forever. So when it's the end, you have that feeling you probably lost 5 or 10 years of your life.
Yeah.
But that was fun. That was a lot of fun. But I retired too, also. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm on the
Yeah.
other side.
100%. Between my job as a realtor at Portugal Realty and hosting this podcast, life is pretty busy. But lately I've been receiving so many messages from people that want to know more about buying property here on Portugal's Silver Coast that I've got to do something about it. So starting now, for subscribers only, I'm offering up a 30-minute session per day. That's 5 30-minute sessions for a one-on-one meeting to talk about buying property here on Portugal's beautiful Silver Coast. This is for subscribers only. So please subscribe to book your session and get in touch with us through the links below via WhatsApp or email to book your session today. I'll be happy to speak to you. It's for subscribers only and it's completely free. I want to talk about the 100-foot wave because this is super interesting and amazing, that the reach that this documentary has had, and I think this documentary single-handedly has brought so many people to Portugal, to this area, which is really, really amazing. But one of the things I remember interviewing Garrett McNamara, I think back in season 1, I think it was season 1 that I interviewed him, or season 2, I can't remember. And he spoke about when he first came to Nazaré, and the local guys learned that he's going to go out and surf these waves. And it was almost like they kind of ignored him a little bit because they were like, this is a dead man walking. We don't want to associate ourselves with this guy who's going to die out there. Obviously now it's amazing because this happened, and now there's this interesting relationship because many of my clients will say, well, is Nazaré a surfing town? And I'm like, not really. It's world famous because of these amazing waves, but when you get downtown or when you go to places like Situ and the historic centers, it's still an authentic Portuguese village. But what has your experience been of the people and them knowing, hey, this is what I'm doing here. I'm involved in this part of my work is involved with the waves and with shooting and filming. What has been the reaction that you've had with the local guys, the local people?
So wouldn't make any comparison with the path Garrett had over there. I mean, Garrett was always a pioneer when it comes to big wave surfing, whether in Nazaré or even in some of our famous locations such as Jaws in Maui or Chopo. So it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
But that first time I came in 2006, and we put the jet ski in the water with the surfboard and the camera. I had that vibe where the fishermen were looking at us like, what are you doing? What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Basically, for them, it was not a playground. It was serious business. It's a place where you can die, and they have to go there because they need to feed their family, and they lost plenty of friends and relatives. So there was something not appropriate, if I may say, at some point. And talking with a few guys, it was difficult for them to understand what was happening. And of course, big wave surfing kicked in. It became more and more popular. As you said, I wouldn't describe Nazaré as a surf city or a surf town. I think Peniche probably look more that way nowadays. Ericeira has a bit of a surf vibe also, even like a lot of a surf vibe. There's plenty of surf shop. Everywhere you walk, you see people with surfboard and cars with surfboard on the roof rack. While Nazaré is a different vibe. If you don't look at Praia do Norte and if you don't look at the guys getting ready in the harbor, basically you don't see any surfing. I think there's only a couple surf shop over there. But what struck me is how fast the people of Nazaré jump into the dynamic of big wave surfing. They understood something was happening. I don't think it was needed at all for them to fight it or stay away from it. They took the opportunity and start being super helpful. And by being helpful, they develop business really fast. And I remember at first when we were going there, like even before 100-foot wave, they were opening some guest house for us at winter. because they knew we'll have to come. And you know that guy, you know that guy. I say, no worries, everything's closed, but we're gonna find a spot for you. And at some point, they ended up opening some restaurants also, or cooking some food for us.
Amazing.
And that was just an offer, you know. There was no money talk at that time. And then of course the more often we were coming, the more people we were sending during production, the more it became a business and an established business. And I was surprised how fast people in Nazaré adapted to that new situation and that
Yeah.
trend of that trend of big wave surfing. And it was like that for everything, for accommodation, for food, production company. There's a great production company from Nazaré, name Above Creators, which kicked I would say 5 to 6 years ago, and which is now becoming the main production company in Nazaré. Whatever you need over there when it comes to production, feature film, stunt, commercial, production service, you're gonna call them, because there's the main guy. And it's a bunch of Nazaré locals, literally people from the early 90s, born in the early 90s, who literally like changed their job and changed position because they saw an opportunity, they saw they could be helpful, but they realized there was business coming their way, and they made it happen. And adaptation was really the thing which surprised me the most.
Yeah, the Portuguese. You may be aware of the word desenrascar in Portuguese, you know, which is the improvisation. You know, just go with the flow. But I think also something that's quite interesting, and this struck me in everybody that I've spoken to about this kind of explosion with the waves. Everybody that I've interviewed and spoken to that have come here, you know, so we're talking, you think of, we both know Mike Prickett, Garrett, I've met a couple of the American guys, and you said something earlier in our conversation about adapting to the rhythm of a place and understanding that this is different and there's something else here. And I get the feeling that everybody that's come to Nazaré has understood that, and that have been respectful, and they've, you know, tried to integrate and connect with local people. And I think when the local people feel this, it's something that they won't be opposed to. It's something that they'll celebrate, and it's something that they will, you know, champion. And I think that's also important. I think it's important the way you guys have come in and not being like, okay, we're separate to all of this, or we're above all of this. No, we're part of this, and we want to be part of this. And you're basically living in Nazaré. So I think that's also a big part of how that's all worked out.
There's one thing to keep in mind with Nazaré, and I guess there's plenty of areas like that in Portugal. It's a fishing town, and even without the surfing and the big wave surfing, when it comes to summertime, there's a lot of tourists coming to Nazaré. I think the place can go up to 120,000 people or something like that.
Exactly.
In January, August. But winter time, those guys, they used to be there by themselves.
Yeah.
And they used to, they have their own sustainability. They can provide pretty much everything they need on a daily basis. But at some point they have, as you say, they have to adapt a lot. And when it comes to fishing or it comes to the ocean, nothing is easy. So those people can be pretty rough because they have to when they're facing the element. What I realized quickly in Nazaré, if you treat the people in Nazaré, first thing first, everybody in Nazaré is super welcoming. There's not a place where I arrive at some point and I felt like, oh, I wasn't welcome.
Yeah.
Everybody's super helpful. And if you treat the people from Nazaré well, if you do it well with an open-minded and you realize what they're doing for you, it's going to be great and the best experience for your life.
Yeah.
But at some point, you start messing around with those people. You're facing people, you know, who used to like a really rough element to a life pretty rough at winter time also. So they're going to be like fully honest with you and tell you, okay, look, man, you're not welcome anymore. Please go out. If you need that, you're not going to get it from us. etc., etc. So the waves are humbling, the ocean is humbling, but people in Nazaré also can be super humbling, and they know how to do it. It's obviously it doesn't last forever. It's only like 10 or 15 minutes, but if you mess with people in Nazaré,
They're tough.
you will, yeah, you will realize pretty soon you're not welcome anymore. So and that's something I like. There's that talk about the Nazaré locals when at first when you arrive in Nazaré, you probably don't realize it because a lot of people speak English. There's a lot of French. There's a lot of Brazilian people from all over the place. So there's that proper melting pot. But if you look closely, Nazaré locals are ruling the place literally, and they're running that ecosystem and make it that great thing it is, and everybody like and enjoy it. So it's important to respect that.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's interesting that like you mentioned earlier, that it's not a peniche, where everything has become about the surf. It's not an Eliseda. It's okay, the surf is part of us, but there's a culture here, there's a thing here that's been here for a lot longer than these waves, and we're not going to change. And I think that's what's been so beautiful and fascinating about Nazaré is it's become one of the top 5 searched for locations in Portugal because of these waves, but Nazaré hasn't changed in terms of, the core, and you still have Carnival, which will never go away. You still have the traditional festas, you still got the beach soccer, the football that happens every year. And there's those things there where it's still Nazaré, and it's still got the authenticity and the spirit of Nazaré hasn't changed, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like everywhere in the world, if you want to see all the changes and if you want to focus on everything new, you will find it in Nazaré. But if you want to, Nazaré will never ever lose its authenticity. It's impossible. It's literally inked into those people and into the town and the way the town was built, and that's something I really like about the place.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 100-foot wave. You have got a number of Emmys for this amazing documentary. Congratulations. How did that all start? Tell us a bit about take us back to the beginning.
For all of us, it started differently. The base of the show, the base of the concept is from Gareth McNamara. And Gareth got in touch with our producer and director, Joe Lewis and Chris Smith, telling them they should come to Nazaré and have a look at the place. And the first time Joe Lewis came here, he had a blast. That was like love at the first sight. He fell in love with the area and the energy. Then he learned a bit more about Gareth's experience and his backstory. And start thinking it would be a great idea to. At first, he wanted to he wanted to produce a feature film, literally.
Okay.
But then he realized reality was more interesting than what fiction could be.
Yeah.
So he joined forces with Chris Smith, who's a great documentary director. He's thanks to him, there's a proper revival of cinema verite in the United States and probably worldwide. And Chris jumped on board and then work on what should have been a 19-minute documentary about the story of Gareth McNamara in Nazaré. And of course, all along the process, they discover more interesting people, more stories, and the show became a series. When I first get on board, I was working on a couple Red Bull project related to big wave surfing in Nazaré, and I was just there to support in production. Then HBO showed up, and we realized it would be like a biggest machine than what we thought. And little by little, we moved to season 2. Season 1 was a success, but season 2 was even a bigger success. Yeah. And we didn't have the time to breathe. That was time for season 3, and we got lucky. We had a beautiful and intense season 3, and I was 6 years of my life being involved in the production and cinematography of 100-foot wave, meeting wonderful people, trying to tell great stories in the best way possible, capturing some great footage all over the place, and having Nazaré as a base camp. was a pretty intense time of my life.
How much of I mean, it might be an obvious question, but I mean, how much of d- d- how much of the conditions, so the actual waves and the ocean, how much did that play a part in how good each season would have been? Because of, okay, if you're filming and there's no decent waves, that would have had an effect, or do you think there were, like you mentioned, how initially it was just about Garrett, it was going to be one episode, but it took on a whole life of its own because of the place, because of all the other stories. Do you think that it could have been a success even if the conditions hadn't been right for filming?
For season one, yes, we didn't really need those conditions because it was mostly based on archival footage. And Nazaré has been documented for so long already. We had enough content. It's almost like we didn't really need to shoot some extra surfing for season one. We could have done with the archival. Um, Season two was a total different beast because we wanted to stay closer to the actuality and what was happening. Um, we started following some characters who were really at the edge of their career. Thinking about Justine Dupont, who was literally at that time on reinventing what a woman can do on the surfboard when it comes to big wave. Lucas Chumbo was already super famous in the surf industry, but who started to get like more and more known when it comes to the mainstream media. And of course, the Portuguese local, Nick Von Rupp, who fully dedicated those past 10 years to Nazaré. Antonio Lorano was kicking in and becoming that young gun, recharging on every session and trying to make the most of each big wave window. So if we didn't get the condition we had for season two, in terms of wave, and trust me, for season two, we were super lucky. We had an amazing winter, honestly, with waves every single day for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we were stocking footage and piling our drive. And at some point, we're like, well, what are we gonna do with all that? And in the end, you just pick the best wave and the best moment. So if we didn't have those crazy conditions for season two, it wouldn't have been the success it was.
Yeah. Timeline wise, season two was filmed was season two filmed when Kosher broke the record the second time, or was this for the timeline of all of this?
No, we started shooting season two literally during the COVID crisis, and we started shooting just before the second lockdown.
Okay.
So if we think about world record, we started shooting a few weeks before Sebastian Stedner broke the world record. That's pretty much when the production of that's pretty much
so
when
this was after Kosher.
Yeah, that was after Kosher. So that's pretty much when the production of season two started, and that time we were still finishing the final touches on season one.
Amazing.
We always had that kind of crossover in terms of schedule. We were finishing one season and already starting the new one, etc., etc. That's how we managed to get the ball rolling for those 3 seasons.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. These guys have this relationship with this place, and a lot of them have almost died here. I battle to get my head around this, but it's incredible that respect for the ocean, which I think again ties back into the tradition of Nazaré. You think about the fishermen, and they have that same respect for the ocean. You probably find at the beginning they battle to get their heads around surfing is supposed to be fun, and maybe it's not a career, but here you guys are also, this is your career, this is their career. Their career is based on what happens out there on the waves. But it's just amazing to me, Justine Kosher. I mean, Kosher almost died a year before he broke the world record. Maya had some really scary moments there. It's just incredible. And that relationship with the place keeps going.
Surfing is usually figured out as a fun sport, almost a hobby and not really a sport. I mean, nowadays it's in the Olympics, so it's different. But when it comes to big wave surfing, it's not really fun. After spending like almost 15 years shooting big wave surfing, you film way more dramas than success.
Yeah.
To be honest, for one world record, you're gonna shoot so many wipeouts, so many jet ski being flipped, body getting destroyed, people being close to bankruptcy because they invested their whole life into their career, and the amount of time we use for the show. For the show, we used to have cameras everywhere when there's a big wave session, one at the harbor, one on the cliff, and the main goal is to capture all the interesting stuff happening. So of course we have 1 to 2 cameras on the beach. And at first we're like, oh, is it really worth it to have a camera operator on the beach the whole day? And we filmed so many people getting washed on the shore, getting injured so many times. We had to move the camera away to let the lifeguard or the safety work. And then you realize, no, it's not fun at all. It's a dangerous sport, and it's a really, really risky business for those guys out there.
Yeah, it's insane. What have you learned about not just Nazaré, about Portugal, about the Portuguese in filming this documentary, Vincent?
So I'm probably going to repeat myself, but in Portugal, if you got a good attitude, people will always treat you well. So treat the people the best way possible, and it will always be rewarding, always. And then you said it before me, just go with the flow. Don't try to force anything. It won't work. And the result you're going to get when you force something is not going to be as good as if you go with the flow. If you start to understand the rhythm, the mentality behind the process, you will make everything happen and in the best way possible.
Yeah. Vincent, what is one thing that you would like people to remember and to take away from our conversation? One thing.
I would like for people who don't really know about Portugal to understand the beauty of Portugal, not only through the landscapes and all those famous beaches, from Nazaré to Peniche, Ericeira and all that, but look more closely at everything happening in Portugal when it comes to culture, to food, to development. Portugal is a country with only 10 million of people living there, if I'm right.
Yeah.
And there's such a huge dynamic, such a great energy, whatever the subject you're looking at, from culture to work to, once again, sorry about that, food, wine. I'm French, obviously, so I know a bit about wine, but trust me, I'm surprised every time I go to Portugal. It's literally a land of opportunity, and spend a lot of time there, and I hope I will spend more time over there. But if people can come to Portugal with an open mind, they will just have a great time.
Yeah. Is Portuguese wine better than French wine?
It's different. Nothing is better than French wine, Dylan.
That's fair. Okay, but let's stay on the food and the wine. Just once, if you could recommend one Portuguese dish that everybody should try when they visit Portugal, what is that Portuguese traditional dish, and what should they drink with it?
Oh, man.
Hardest question of the day.
Oh, yeah, it's difficult. I feel really bad about it because I used to love coming to Portugal to enjoy some really good octopus. And then I ended up watching that Netflix documentary, My Octopus Teacher, which it kind of killed my vibe, but I still authorized myself to get some. Just up north of Ericeira, there's a restaurant named Abica, in which they serve a beautiful octopus.
Okay. What's it called? Abica?
Abica.
Okay.
And they serve a beautiful octopus with some rice and feijão. It's a unique dish, and it's not on the menu. You need to know about it, but I recommend everyone to go there once and be nice and to smile and ask the chef for that meal, because it's one of my favorites ever.
And what would you drink with it? What do you recommend? Some vinho verde? Red. Where are you going with there?
It's pretty funny. I wasn't much of a white wine guy before coming to Portugal,
Yeah.
and I start drinking some proper really good Vino Verde. Sorry, I shouldn't name any brand, but there's a one, Casal Garcia, which is not great. So the day I skipped that and I went into like the better one, I start to enjoy it a lot. But usually what I like to do is, depending of the area I am in Portugal, to drink the local wine.
The local
And
wine. Me too.
and something you're never ever. So I got that from Jose Gregorio. You're never disappointed when you ask in a restaurant the vino d'occassion. If you ask
the house wine.
the ice wine, like usually
Yeah.
they serve you a bottle which is both affordable and goes really well with the meal you're enjoying.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I love it. How can people follow you, Vincent? See what you're up to, see the work that you're doing, follow you on
I would say mostly through my website, which is my first name and my last name.com. I'm not really efficient on social network except probably LinkedIn because I'm 45 years old now, and I guess at some point
that's where we found each other, keeping it real for the 80s babies,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Okay, awesome. I'll put some links in the show notes so people can stay in touch and follow what you're doing. Vincent, it's been great. One more question, and a question that we ask all of our guests. Portugal, the simple life. Why?
I wouldn't say the simple life,
Okay.
because nothing is simple in life. It really depends on your stake, I would say. But when I wasn't working in Portugal, what I really enjoyed was looking at the ocean first thing in the morning, then having a nice breakfast, waiting for the right condition, go in the water or do other kind of exercise outside, riding my bike or whatever else, meet some friends, have some coffees, and get some great food at night, and eat, sleep, repeat. And for some reason, Portugal is the only place where I manage to do that. Usually I'm on a rush, and if I'm not working, I'm trying to figure out like what will be the next mission or the next work. I have that feeling I'm always busy, and Portugal calmed me down. So yeah, if it was a simple life, that would be just to once again go with the flow, follow the people, follow the elements.
Amazing. Vincent, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks a lot, Dylan.
And I'm going to let you say something that I think you've probably said a few times, but
I said it a lot, but I guess it's a wrap.
So thank you once again to our guest, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal The Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to The Simple Life.